Hi, this is Stu Tinker from SK Tours in Derry, Maine, and I'm listening to the Stephen King podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 98 of the Stephen King podcast. I'm your host, Lou Sytsma, and I want to wish every one of you a belated Happy New Year. I realize this is coming out late in the month, but time has a way of slipping away sometimes, and this is the first chance I've really had to sit down and do the next podcast episode. So we'll be looking back at 2018, hitting some of the high points of a very impressive year for Mr. King. It's going to be interesting to see if 2019, the year of 19, the year of King, can 2019 surpass 2018? It will be impressive if it can, because as we go back and look at 2018, we're going to see that it was a heck of a year for Mr. King. And of course, for all us Stephen King fans. But before I do that, just a quick announcement. This will be the last podcast until probably March, because I'm going in for knee surgery this week. So that's going to put me off my back for at least 3 or 4 weeks, recovering from that. So my apologies up front for that. But when we come back with episode 99, we will be looking ahead at the 2019. But for now, we're going to stick with 2018. And before we do that, of course, as always, let's check out the latest Stephen King news.
Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the Deathroom.
First item that's come across my desk that of importance, and the most recently announced one was on January 18th. We found out that the Rock Bottom Reminders will be reviving, and they will be appearing at a concert for First Avenue with Amy Tang, Mary Carr, humorist Dave Barry, and sports writer Mitch Albom. And this will be the Minneapolis New Book Festival, and Wordplay in May will feature about 100 top writers of everything from fiction to cookbooks. So if you're in the Minneapolis area in May, you've got some extra incentive now to check out that event. And it's been a while since Rock Bottom Reminders have played again, and that festival will take place on May 11th to 12th in downtown Minneapolis. It'll include readings, conversations, panel discussions, craft lectures, writing workshops, cooking demonstrations, and children activities, including a real-life Where's Waldo. And events will be scattered amongst various venues there, so I highly recommend that if you live in that area or plan to be in the area, Minneapolis, May 11th to 12th, check it out, and check out the Rock Bottom Reminders. Moving on to movie news, we have the latest Pet Sematary teaser, and in it, it's a very short clip, but we get to see Zelda. And so far, everything that has been released for this movie is looking really good, and I highly recommend you check that out. It's Pet Sematary, Dead is Better. So looking forward to that. Moving on to video front, and there's quite a bit of news actually on the video front, which is another indication of Stephen King's popularity, is that the following releases are being planned, and that includes Pet Sematary, the original, is going to get a 4K Ultra HD and new Blu-ray for the 30th anniversary, and we've reported on this previously, and it will be out on March 26th, so which is just about a couple of weeks before the April release of the new Pet Sematary movie. So check that out, and it'll be interesting. I'm really interested to see what the behind the scenes features are going to be. So looking forward to that. And it'll include a bonus commentary by director Mary Lambert. Also includes some features of Stephen King character, territory, the characters, and filming the horror. So this will be interesting to especially compare against the recent documentary that was released by John Campiopano for the Pet Sematary movie. continuing on the release front, and unlike Mr. Mercedes Season 1 that only got a DVD release, they're going all in on Castle Rock Season 1. It's getting a 4K Ultra HD release and as well as a Blu-ray release. So I assume that this will be continuing with some additional behind-the-scenes features. And while I wasn't crazy about the series, it's nice to see that it is getting the full state-of-the-art home video release treatment, and it includes, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 special features, and it looks like each episode is going to get its own special feature inside the episode. These are features that already have aired on Hulu, and actually you can still find them there, so they're probably more like electronic press kits. But again, it's just great to see the Castle Rock series getting primo treatment as far as home media release goes. Hopefully this will spark something similar to happen for the first season of Mr. Mercedes. And another blast from the past is Sleepwalkers. It's getting a Blu-ray, and this is coming out from Scream Factory, who's been doing great work pulling out these old chestnuts and sprucing them up and re-releasing them. The special features on this one are a new audio commentary with director Mick Garris and actors Machen Amick and Brian Krause. Interview with Mick Garris, interview with the actors Machen Amick and Brian Krause. And Machen, if I'm mispronouncing your first name, please forgive me. The makeup effects creator, Tony Gardner, and prosthetic designer Mike Smithson. Some behind-the-scenes footage, the usual theatrical trailer, TV spots, still galleries. It's good to see this, I guess, cult favorite getting released as well. And once again, thanks to Scream Factory for continue to do this kind of work. All right, this is a pleasant surprise, is that Stephen King's short story, one of his more grisly tales for sure, Survivor Type, is being adapted for the new Creepshow TV series that is coming out on the horror streaming service Shudder. So if nothing else, this streaming service has pulled in a new Creepshow series that hopefully will attract viewers. And I'm not sure when this is starting. Let me see here. It just says the series is set to debut on Shudder sometime this year. So unfortunately, there's no solid set date on this one yet. One more news announcement is that The Outsiders is starting filming in Atlanta from February through July, and they've put out a casting call. So all you burgeoning actors or just fans that just want to be part of this experience, you will have a chance, if you're in the Atlanta area, to answer the casting call and see if you can get in there. And it's kind of interesting that this Outsiders series is being filmed. And the reason I say that is because it shuts down one of the possible avenues for what season 3 of Mr. Mercedes was going to be about. And we already knew that to a certain degree because of that Instagram post that was put up by the showrunners showing that they hadn't completed telling the tale of the third book yet. So this pretty well locks down the possibilities of the third season being The Outsider. There's no way that's going to happen now. So it's good to know. All right. So that is everything on this news ticker tape for this episode, and let's go on to our special look at 2018.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around, pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift.
All right, guys, let's take a look back at 2018 in the Stephen King multiverse. And to say that 2018 was a crazy busy year for Stephen King and Stephen King fans is an understatement. Is 2018 going to be the apex of the Kingnassance? I guess we'll have to check out. All I know is that going through the archive of news stories about King for 2018, I had to pull like a best of list here, because otherwise I'd be on this podcast for 3 or 4 hours. And I don't think anybody, no matter how dedicated they are as a Stephen King fan, wants to go through every item. So I've selectively and subjectively picked the news items that caught my eye the most. And we're going to go right back to January of 2018. And all these news items I'm mentioning, you can find listed on Hans's site at Lilia's library. And you can go to the specific dates that I'll mention for each article and you'll find the article and you can check it out further if you want to. So let's start off January. Big news. Mike Flanagan to direct Dr. Sleep. And this was exciting enough news to get after his wonderful adaptation of Gerald's Game for Netflix last year. But I think his status has shot even higher with the wonderful adaptation that he did of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. I personally think that adaptation will become be considered a near classic, if not a classic, in the years to come. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to be doing with Dr. Sleep. So you can check that article out on January 26th. And then we found out in February, it's unbelievable. Like, I don't know, the way things are going, they're going to be adapting King's Laundry List if this keeps up. But apparently a poem, The Bone Church, is going to be turned into a film. It was included as part of The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, and it talks about, or the poem's about, an adventurer, kind of like a Dr. Livingstone explorer, going into Africa looking for this mythical bone church. And 32 people went in and only 3 came out. So this will be interesting. It's a TV series, not a movie. It's a series. So how much they're going to have to take a lot of liberty here to get this to fill out a season. Hopefully we'll see what happens here. No further on as to when the series is going to be aired, and we'll just have to keep our ear to the ground for 2019 to see what happens with this. But under the category of most unusual adaptations, I think this one is up near the top. And in February, we also found out that King's second book for 2018 was going to be released in October. And you can find this article on February 7th. And the book, of course, is Elevation. And if you've listened to our recent podcast with me and Steve Spignesi, we both waxed poetic about this book. And I think the more it gets removed from the current climate and people have some distance between what's going on now, I think this book will rise in stature, and I think it's a fantastic book by King. In March 30th, we also found out that a new movie was going to be based on the Tommyknockers, once originally filmed as I believe it was ABC TV miniseries in 1993. That one starred Jimmy Smits and Mark Helgenberger. This will be interesting because it's not one of my favorite King books, and the miniseries wasn't really that great either. So we'll have to see what they can do with this. But hey, Tommyknockers come back, you got to deal with it or ignore it. It's up to you. March, the surprising King and Bev Vincent anthology, Flight or Fright. And this anthology has done really well, and I pretty well enjoyed almost every story in it, except one or two. And for an anthology, that's a pretty good, that's a fantastic batting average. Not even just a good one, but fantastic. And it's great to get so many classic tales that I've read before, especially the stuff by John Varley and his short story that was eventually became his book for a Millennium, which I really enjoyed that one. Of course, Richard Matheson's Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Doyle's Horror of the Heights was interesting. And of course, we have King's Turbulent Expert. And my personal favorite in this anthology was Joe Hill's You Are Released. Just a very adroit bit of writing, doing multiple POVs, point of views in a short story. Just a fantastic story. And it's a writer on the top of his game, man. And I really enjoyed that story quite a bit. Moving on to April, The Long Walk. One of my favorite King stories at one time, and for a long time, Frank Darabont was going to adapt, is apparently coming to the screen courtesy of New Line Cinema. And as we learn on the April 26th article, that unfortunately Darabont is no longer tied to this project, and it's actually, the rights have now been picked up by James Vanderbilt, who was behind the Robert Redford, Kate Blanchett drama Truth. And we'll have to see. I haven't heard anything further on this one. I'm sorry that Darabont's not attached to it any longer, but I think this is a story that, much like The Dead Zone, is even more relevant to today's social media climate. And I'm really looking forward to this adaptation. May. We're into May. And we find out that the new adaptation of the Pet Sematary book that stars Jason Clarke and John Lithgow has been moved from April 19th to April 5th. So that's good news. Sooner is always better. And based on the media material that we've seen so far, this looks like a promising take, and it's definitely going to be a bit different than the previous adaptation. And that's, in my book, is always a good thing. I'd love to see a different version of this, and hoping you guys can pull it off, because this has the potential to be even scarier than another big King movie that's coming out later on in the year in 2019. And great news also in May, on May 11th, an article, we learned through the Stephen King message board that Stephen King has finished another book, and that was written after Outsider and Elevation, and it's pretty still clouded in mystery. We don't know anything about it. The only thing we know for sure that it's coming out in November, and what that could be, there's several possibilities. Of course, we can always hope for a brand new original work from King. There's also the possibility of another Dark Tower novel, which I think a lot of us would love for his telling of the battle at Jericho Hill. And then there's the potential for another Holly Gibney story after what happened in The Outsider, but we'll have to see when we're going to find out anything bit more. I mentioned probably in the first quarter of this year, maybe around March, we'll start to get more details about what this new book is all about, but I can hardly wait to find out what it is. And 2019 is going to continue with another King book, and who knows, he may surprise us, as he usually does, with something that's not announced yet that we can all look forward to as a unexpected treat. Also in May, King received the PEN Award, and there's an article May 23rd. You can go there. There's a link to a video where you can see Morgan Freeman of the Shawshank Redemption fame giving the award to King, and you can check out the video there. So the 2018 PEN America Literary Gala is when King received another award, this time the PEN Award. Also in May was The Outsider, and the release of that book. It's King's latest, or I guess now second latest novel. And this book, I think, was I don't want to say pleasant, but it was a nice return to what I would call old school King. It had much more of a darker tone to it, much more of a monster vibe, I guess you could say, and at the same time, thematic elements in it that reflect things that are going on in the world today. So I thought this was a pretty fantastic book. I know Hans was a little let down by the climax of the of the book, but I thought it was totally in line with what had been set up before. And King pulled a couple of tricks in this book that surprised me. I thought this was going to be a redemption story for the protagonist, but it turned out to be a redemption story for somebody else. And then, of course, Holly showed up. So I just really enjoyed this book quite a bit. It was fun. It was a really fun book. And also in May, one of those things that King always likes to do is an unannounced treat. And this time it was even a free one. And that was a new short story called Lori. And this was a great story about an older gentleman around King's age, I guess you could say, that had just lost his wife and got a pet dog. They both encounter an experience that only Stephen King would think of. So it's amazing how, in such a short story, how he still has that ability to create characters that just jump out at you with just some carefully worded turns of phrases. Just a fantastic story, and I really enjoyed this one as well. All right, we're into the halfway point, and June 29th, Mr. Flanagan is busy working on Dr. Sleep, and we get the news that Rebecca Ferguson of the last Mission Impossible movie fame is going to play Rose the Hat in Dr. Sleep. And this is really exciting news. She's a standout in the last two Mission Impossible movies, stands toe-to-toe with Tom Cruise. So I'm expecting that she will be a electrifying and dominant presence in Dr. Sleep. And I can't just wait to see what she brings to this role, and the anticipation of seeing her stealing the steam from some of the victims is going to be a real treat, I believe, especially in the hands of Mike Flanagan. So we're really looking forward to seeing Rebecca Ferguson in Dr. Sleep. And June 12th, we also find out, and we've been reporting on this off and on during the year, that the Dark Tower TV show, which now rests over at Amazon, is still under consideration. They're moving slowly with this, which I think is good. And I think some distance between this TV series, if it ever comes to pass, and the movie can only benefit the TV series. But apparently scripts have been written for it, according to Jennifer Salk, and she was the head of the Amazon studios at that time. I don't know if she still is, and because I think there was a little bit of a retraction of what was going on with the Dark Tower series, but there's been continuing reports after this particular article that the show isn't dead yet, so we'll just have to see where it goes. But fingers crossed, fellow gunslingers, that Roland will rise once again in some other adaptational form. And I'm based on what we're seeing like on HBO with Game of Thrones and whatnot, this is probably the best format for the Dark Tower series of books is to be done as a TV series on a cable network. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed about that. Still in June, we also got reports, and this is a June 11th article, is that Media Rights Capital plans a 10-episode limited series based on The Outsider. And that is great news. At the time, we were sort of speculating if this was going to tie into Mr. Mercedes, because the showrunner of Mr. Mercedes, Jack Bender of the Lost series fame, was also involved with The Outsider. So we'll learn later on in the year that probably is not going to play out, but it's going to be interesting still if the actress that plays Holly in the Mr. Mercedes series, is she going to play Holly in The Outsider? That will also be interesting to see. I just realized, because if they're not related, I wonder if she can cross over and do that, but we'll have to see. It'd be interesting to have two Hollys in the, I guess, would these be out in 2019 or would it be 2020? But there's a potential for two Hollys coming down the road. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out as well. Also in June 29th, we find out that the news of a new Firestarter adaptation was met with mixed reactions, to say the least, because Akiva Goldsmith is attached to the project, and his track record with doing adaptations of material for movie and TV is spotty at best. But it's worth pointing out that this will actually be adapted by another writer, Scott Teems, and Jason Mullum. Akiva Goldsmith will be producing, along with Martha De Laurentiis, who you may remember way back when worked on a lot of King movies, including the original Firestarter, as well as Maximum Overdrive, to name a few. So I think it's good news that it sounds like Goldsman's more hands-off producing. He will still have say, obviously, in the story and that, but hopefully with this other writer, Scott Teems, who I really don't know anything about, I think that gives us a little bit more hope for it. And the German director, Fatih Akin, won last year's Golden Globe, I guess that would have been 2017 now, for the In the Fade. And I really don't know anything about that. Still something I have to check out. But he will be directing a new adaptation of Firestarter for Universal and Blumhouse. So something to be a little more excited about in terms of what's going on behind the scenes. So hopefully this will turn out to be a pleasant surprise to us all. In July, another surprise, not anything that Stephen King did, but it was actually this time Steven Spielberg had a whole section of his movie from 2018, Ready Player One, which was a recreation of the Overlook Hotel from The Shining, and they did a fantastic job. And if you haven't seen this movie yet, I highly recommend you check it out. If for nothing else, it's just for the Shining sequence, which is just a lot of fun. And boy, what they can do with technology nowadays is just amazing, because that looked like the hotel from the famous Stanley Kubrick version of the book. So definitely check that movie out if you haven't. It's a lot of fun. In July, and I'm wondering if this is the new book we're going to get, and that's the article from July 17th in which Stephen King hints about a new story. And it's about phones. And I don't know if this is a sequel to Cell, or is it a short story and that's not related to the book? We're not sure, but we'll have to keep an eye on it. The hints for what the next book might be about. Maybe King's writing about the proliferation of social media and our dependence on electronic devices that support it, whether it's phones or tablets or even our watches. Who knows? But this will be interesting to see if that's what the new book is about. I kind of hope not, because he's already done Cell, but Obviously that whole area of technologies is ripe for many other stories as well, but we'll have to see. Anyhow, check that out. July 17th, that article on Hans's sites. It might be what the new book is going to be all about. Then in July, we get some Castle Rock teasers, and that's when Castle Rock aired. So again, summertime, another Stephen King series. And well, we all know many of us have seen this series now. We all know it didn't really live up to the potential of what we thought it could be, in my opinion. Others may disagree, but it was worth watching. And hopefully, because it's an anthology series, there's always next season, right? So it could turn out to be better than the first season. We'll have to see. Still in July 31st, we learned that Stephen King will narrate the audiobook version of Elevation. That's fantastic. I loved his narration on Bag of Bones. Thought that really brought that book to life. And I'm sure that his narration of Elevation, which I have not heard yet, but I'm sure that he added something extra to that story as well. All right, so we're getting close to getting out of the summer, but in August 14th, Mr. Mercedes was released on DVD, season 1. So if you haven't had an opportunity to see the show, there is an alternative method, old school, physical media, DVDs. I'm surprised there's not a Blu-ray version yet, but we'll have to see what happens there. Anyhow, if you need to see season 1, Mr. Mercedes, it is out and available. And then in August, also released was the announcement that Maximum Overdrive was coming to Blu-ray. And that was announced on August 17th. And the actual Blu-ray was released on October 23rd. And it was a blast. I really enjoyed watching this high-def version of Maximum Overdrive. And there's a whole podcast dedicated to that Tyson Blue and I did. So check that out if you want more details and thoughts about Maximum Overdrive. September was the release of the Flight or Fright anthology, which was mentioned way back in March. I believe I brought that up as a highlight. And again, great book, and I loved it. So check out Flight or Fright, September 5th. And there's also a clip there of the audiobook narrator, Norbert Leo Butz. I don't know if he just did one story or all of them. So you'll have to check that out. And then on October 30th, Elevation was out. Loved it, as you know, probably too well by now that I loved it. But you can check out, again, our review with me and Steven Spignesi. A wonderful change of pace for King. People complain about his books being too long. This one was definitely a smaller book, but like Neil Gaiman's Ocean at the End of the Lane, small book filled with really big ideas. Just a fantastic book. In November, we found out that Mr. Mercedes was renewed for season 3. And at that time, speculation was all over the map as to what it was going to be about, because they had done the End of Watch book, but it had departed rather radically, especially in the last 4 episodes from the book. And we got that follow-up Instagram picture from the showrunners saying that they were still had story to tell. So are they going to get into that whole, the stranger aspects of that story about mind control and jumping consciousness? We'll have to see, but I definitely don't think it's going to be anything to do with The Outsider, which was the other possibility. So yeah, Mr. Mercedes season 3, and production is scheduled to start this year in Charleston, South Carolina once again. And finally, in December, we have the annual message from Stephen King, and he talks about, in his message, the inspirations for The Outsider, which came from a Edgar Allan Poe story called William Wilson. And he also talks about the fact that both The Outsider and Elevation won the Goodreads, which is an online book review site. If any of you are not familiar with it, I highly recommend you check it out. You can set up an account and keep track of all the books you read, and you can see what other people are reading and their opinions on it. Does your opinion match with the mob, or are you an outlier? And that happens quite a bit in both cases, actually, and it's a lot of fun to see what other people think of stuff. Plus, you hear about books that you normally wouldn't hear about from anywhere else. So Goodreads is another testament to the power of the Stephen King multiverse, that both of his books that were released in 2018 won choice awards over at Goodreads. So that's pretty cool. So there we go. That is 2018. Boy, oh boy. Unbelievable. And I didn't catch everything. There's other news items that might have been more exciting for you, and I apologize, but I'm just running it based on what was exciting to me. And there's going to be a lot of fun stuff coming out in 2019. And of course, we will talk about that in the next podcast, which probably won't be out until March, as I mentioned off at the beginning of the show. Total knee replacement number 2. Hopefully this will be the last of this kind of stuff for me. I don't want to have to replace any more joints, like hip joints or anything like that. But yeah, man, who would have thought, from carry all the way up to elevation? It's just unbelievable how long of a run we've had with Mr. King. And it's been a pretty level playing field of quality. Not too many dips. Maybe in the 90s, you could argue a little bit that King was dipping a little bit, but after his accident and recovery, he's come back with a vengeance. And to see the last 2 books that he released in 2018 were so good, put up against pretty well anything that anybody would put in the top 10 of their all-time favorite King books, is pretty amazing. So let's just see what happens in 2019, the year of 19. It's got to be good, right? It's got to be good. All right, folks, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. We'll be talking to you. See you in March. Until then, happy reading, long days, and pleasant nights. The end. Oh, and I almost forgot. Remember, stay safe, but stay scared. Bull. The end. Bye.